because the last thing you wanted to see was in either direction, a bum series, and at least now you see Kansas City stormed back and really in the opposite fashion that you thought after you watched the first game. So now the series has some life, some fan interest as well, and that's always a good thing as you head now to the weekend here. More eyes will be on it here once the weekend comes and it shifts over to San Francisco. Should be fun. I agree. Kansas City's going to be in it. I don't know, man. I love the starting pitching of the Giants, man. I really do.
Yeah, I think, my thing is I think, the bullpen gives the Royals a huge advantage. And they're, they essentially have, in my mind, they essentially have 9 shots to score and their opponent has 6. That's the way that they have kind of built their team. And as long as those 3 guys keep coming out of the bullpen and basically keep throwing gas, and that formula gives you a really good shot to win when you have an extra third of a chance to win, to score runs versus your opponent. And I agree with you. I think last night was a big game to keep the series even. And I'm kind of one of those that I don't think home field in the first half of a 7-game series matters, and I think it matters a lot in the last 3 games. So I think as long as they split. And however that happens, if they split the next 2 games, I think you've got yourself a real series, and I think the advantage goes to Kansas City, and we'll see.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun as you come to this weekend. I hear you. Kansas City has that great bullpen. San Francisco's, Jeff and I, when we were previewing the series on Tuesday, though, we were both like in the process of gather and prep for the segment. We're like, man, San Francisco's bullpen has been they haven't been no slouch themselves over here, and I do have a lot of respect for both managers. I like Ned Yost because he drives the internet crazy, and I like Bruce Bochy as well. So it's man, I'm all for a good series, really. I don't have a dog in the fight. I won't be mad either way this thing goes, so I'm all about it.
Yeah, I'm with you. And a funny note to this series, running our site and our Twitter handle, I try to follow, blogs and sites of other teams and, dedicated, real knowledgeable fans. And I wouldn't say that I have every team covered, but I have a good chunk. And so Royals Twitter to me is like entertainment in itself.
It is.
I should go get 10 names and give them out to people, because watching them, it's like watching someone else's train wreck. Because I'm like you, I don't really have a dog in the fight, and I mean personally, I'd just like to see a good series that goes 6 or 7 games and has a little drama to it, and hopefully is good for the game. But watching Royals Twitter, it's kind of like watching Browns Twitter on a Sunday. You just get to stand from the sidelines and watch it this time, though, because I mean they hinge on every play, Jerry, and then it's kind of funny to me.
Oh, I'm telling you, man. Did you see the way Yost breathed in the bullpen? That's ridiculous. He's going to cost. I'm telling you, they do, though. They lose their mind. And that's why I joke about Ned Yost. I'm like, I want him to win just to watch Twitter's face melt off, because he's the anti, playing the sabermetrics and the numbers and all of that, man. He's the gut feeling, run all over the place, run you into innings, run you out of innings. He doesn't care. And they go nuts. They go nuts over him. I just love it. I said, for that reason alone, I want to see that man win. And I want to see him win a clinching game where he makes the most whacked out coaching decisions in the world and they all go his way. He's stealing everything with 2 outs. He's going for third. He's doing whatever he can do to drive the internet crazy.
Yeah, and I think Ned Yost, to say he doesn't play it by the book is an understatement.
Yes.
But no matter where you come out on Ned Yost, he's definitely unconventional. But no matter what happens in this series, and if he helps win it for him or he helps lose it for him, I don't know how you can ever get by the fact that they wouldn't have won that game, that 1 game wild card game, without him basically, deciding, hey, we're out of it and we are going to run ourselves right back into it. We're going to run ourselves out of this game and lose by 10, or we're going to run right back into it. And, I'm not sure there's very many managers that would have done that. There's a lot of guys that would have sat around and waited for a 3-run homer that probably never would have come. And instead, he could see the outs, dripping away in their season, and he decided to, basically get busy living or get busy dying, and he went for it.
Thank you. Dan Wismar and I were talking about that the day after that game, and we were talking about people going nuts as he's making these decisions, and now you sit back and look a couple weeks later at where they are. I'm like, I think of that night and how he was the worst manager of all time for those couple of hours during that game. But guess what? Who cares what you said? He doesn't care what Twitter said because they won and they're in the World Series. But you think back, if he was just infuriating Royals fans, baseball fans, bloggers, know-it-alls, and they just thought that this guy was running his team right out of their 30-year playoff wait, and then bam, I agree with you. Without that, they don't come back from those that deficit there and don't beat Oakland, and here we go. I keep saying they were done, and here they are. So whatever. Hey, let's shift gears. We'll talk some more next week. If there's, we'll see if there's a decision in this thing or if they're still playing. Indians decisions as we get closer to the end of the World Series. You start to click on the timer. The off season begins for all of these teams here. 3 days after the last game of the World Series, got different decisions for clubs to make. Indians don't have much in that regard. Mike Aviles, a lot of people say they think a foregone conclusion that the Indians pick up his option. I know you and I have talked payroll, and you mentioned like the $6 million guy and how that's the no zone for the Indians to have. What do you think about that Aviles option? It's a little short of $4 million, but I like him. Some people don't. I think he's very valuable with his versatility and what he does, and it's not like, he's awful. I mean, I get it. He's about a 250 hitter this season or whatever, but I like Mike Aviles. But where are you at on him and them picking up that option for that amount?
I'm going to go and talk out of both sides of my mouth here because I agree that, to me, the Indians should have 4 kinds of players, and that's the young guys that make near the league minimum, a young player that they've developed that's on a long-term contract, a guy that they have gone out and signed via free agency to big dollars, and the aging veteran that they've, to use their terms, fished from the bottom. And I'm not sure Aviles fits any of those categories. He's very close to the $6 million man, and I'd use that term, but I would say, anywhere from, 2 to 3 million up to, 8 or 9, I think, is a guy that, a lot of times gives you the same effort and production as maybe what you would get from a young player. And I think it's easy to make the comparison that Jose Ramirez can give you the same as Mike Aviles. But with all that said, I'm right there with you, Jerry, and I would bring him back after I just outlined 10 reasons why not to. I would bring him back for the simple fact, and if I had Chris Antonetti's job, nearly every move that I would make to the position players this winter, I would have with an eye on defense. And we talked about this last week, but there's only 2 players on this roster that are deemed positive defenders, and that's Mike Aviles and that's Jose Ramirez. And I don't know how you can have such an atrocious defense and then let one of those 2 guys walk out of town. And I think with that in mind, I would exercise the Aviles option, and I think Jose Ramirez and Francisco Lindor and Mike Aviles can all coexist because, again, if I'm running the controls down at Progressive Field, I'm looking hard to find somebody that's interested in Lonnie Chisenhall. And for me, Mike Aviles and Jose Ramirez can slot right in there into some kind of platoon at third, and open the door for Chisenhall to be moved to hopefully bring them back some help in some other areas.
So that's what we personally think about this. You think the Tribe does it? A lot of people seem to think yes, but there is the question of will they? You think they pull the trigger and bring him back next season?
Yeah, I think they'll bring Aviles back, but I hope I'm wrong, but I think they'll do it backwards, and they'll start the year with Chisenhall at third, unless they find a sweetheart deal, which isn't what it would take for me to make that move. But I think, they're going to look, for the moon and the stars for him, and he'll likely come back, and then you'll have a platoon of Aviles and Ramirez, and we'll be waiting for Lindor, which I think is a huge mistake personally, but we'll see. I do think that they'll pick that option up, and that it does give them some roster flexibility moving through the winter, where they definitely have a number of options to try and build a better infield defense. And at $3 million, even though I think that's a zone the Indians should avoid, I'm not sure that they can afford to avoid that zone when you have a positive defender right now and their defense is so awful.
Hey, Mike, let me throw this to you. I vaguely know what you're going to say, but I don't know the exact numbers, so I'll leave this to you. Dan, in the chat room, wanted to know, Gomes and Brantley aren't plus defenders. I know you said Brantley was like right around the median mark, wasn't he? Like, not negative, not positive. What about Gomes?
Gomes is tough with the metric that I've looked at in UZR, because it really takes into range and how many plays you make in the range you can cover. And obviously a catcher doesn't have range. There's a lot more emphasis on pitch framing, which he does come out as kind of a positive. But he's just kind of above what I would consider the middle mark, first 6 weeks of the season, where for some reason it blind or with his hands on backwards, he made 7 errors and had like 4 pass balls in the first 6 weeks, and then the light switch flipped and good Yan Gomes came back and evil Yan Gomes left town. Then he's a much more positive defender. So it's probably unfair to say that Aviles and Ramirez are the only positive defenders. I would say Gomes has to be included in that, and hopefully if he can avoid those, I think then he moves into probably the top third, and he's a top 10 defensive catcher, and to me that's how you start to try and rebuild this defense. If you can't fix it all at once, and but building a good defense up the middle I think goes a long way, and that's again why I go back to, I'm not sure that they can necessarily let Aviles walk, because he's a guy that obviously can play up the middle. So if you have Gomes and you have Jose Ramirez and eventually Lindor at some point, and Aviles, you have guys that can play up the middle. Your only negative defenders then become Michael Bourne and Jason Kipnis.
And I'll tell you, we talked about Gomes. I still equate that beginning of the season to him to the weight, the albatross across his neck of that contract, and figuring out, how am I going to live up to this? And then finally somebody said, hey, just go out there and play baseball, man. And then he loosened up for whatever it was that got through, and then there you go. But I thought, man, there's no coincidence. I mean, you see it a lot with guys, and then you wonder, is it, like Rayburn's the opposite. He never bounced back. He got the money, and not that he got huge money, but he got some money, and then we said, oh man, look at that. But yeah, I thought that was weighing on him, and then really we saw him turn things around. I love Gomes there, but I want to ask you.
The other thing to remember about Gomes, I think a lot of people forget, he's a pretty young guy, and his wife had a baby in that stretch too.
Beginning
and
of the season.
I think we forget that these guys they're real people. They go to the grocery store and eat food and everything.
No.
They're not robots. And
no.
I don't want to make excuses for a guy, for poor performance, but I mean, I'm also going to guess, he has some other things on his mind than just calling pitches for those 6 weeks. And I'm not, I'm not excusing it, and I'm not saying that it's okay either. But we're all human, and it does seem that about the time that his child was born, he suddenly decided to, as you said, just go out and play, and things got back to normal.
What did Ohio have on his mind? Because he'll remind you every day that life is good. Life is good. You should have nothing on your mind but baseball if life is that good.
It's good for him. It's not good for the rest of us watching him, I'll tell you that. I mean...
You ever want to get a rise out of Mike, you just say Nick Swisher and let it go, man. Just put it out there, man.
I'm so torn when I see him on the Fox broadcast, because I laugh at people when Indians or any player of any sport, tweets something off the field and people tweet back at them, why don't you mix in a workout or something? I saw somebody, Jason Kipnis comes to mind. He commented on the Cavs and the Bulls, and I think a lot of people know that Kipnis is from Chicago, and he's a big Chicago